Let's kick it off with something fun. Cab drivers in New York are used to seeing some crazy things happen in their back seats, but this next story is easily at the top of the list.
A livery cab driver in Brooklyn could moonlight as a midwife after helping a couple welcome their baby girl into the world right there in his car.
Louis Leonardo couldn't predict the drama that unfolded in his back seat.
Picked up 2 and dropped off 3. Simple as that.
Cameras were recording, as they always do, when he picked up a couple earlier this month in Bushwick, the woman in labor.
My head is in my hand.
And with the baby breathing, the couple wrapped her in a blanket, and Louis kept on driving.
Damn.
Damn! Ha! You do realize that was the first word that baby heard. Damn! And I hope the parents give that guy 5 stars, because I'm just happy when my driver offers me like a mint and a phone charger. This guy was cutting umbilical cords. And even though this might not have been the ideal plan for these parents, you have to admit, after being born in a cab, that kid can handle anything in life. Unlike those other babies that are born in like a bathtub while Enya is playing in the background. Just come out like, wow, I'm allergic to gluten, wow. This is a real baby. The only thing that taxi baby is gonna be allergic to is people who drive slow. I'm crawling over here. What's wrong with you? What are you, a baby? But let's move on. Because if you think a baby being born in a backseat is the weirdest procreation story you'll hear all week, you might want to think again.
There's been some new and disturbing reporting this morning on accused sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. First from the New York Times, that he believed he could improve the population of the world by seeding the human race with his DNA.
Epstein owns a sprawling ranch in New Mexico. According to a new report, he wanted to use the ranch for controlled breeding, using his DNA to improve humanity. The article reports Epstein surrounded himself with leading scientists and would tell them he wanted to have 20 women impregnated at a time on the ranch.
Okay, first off, Jeffrey Epstein's sperm ranch is by far the worst flavor of salad dressing I've ever heard of. And secondly, why is it that the people who want to spread their DNA are always the last people who should be spreading their DNA? Always. Because nobody's ever looked at Jeffrey Epstein and been like, yeah, we need 20 million more of this guy. That's what we... Yeah, like how come Idris Elba doesn't have a sex ranch, huh? Yeah, I'd go. Yeah, and don't say, oh, Trevor, Idris Elba can't get a man pregnant. Well, I'm willing to find out. In other news, if I was to ask you in the audience, what's the biggest problem you think the American government should solve right now? What would you say? Anyone? Climate? Healthcare? Trump? Ah, well, you're all wrong. But if you said Instagram, then the Senate has got your back.
A new Senate bill may ultimately affect how much you spend when it comes to time on social media. It's called the Social Media Addiction Reduction Technology Act, or SMART Act for short. As the name suggests, it is being introduced to fight social media addiction. To do this, the bill will crack down on practices used by social network sites to keep you online longer, and that includes features like infinite scroll for news feeds and autoplay for videos.
That's right. A Republican senator is proposing a new law to try and curb social media addiction. And you have to admit that it is becoming a real problem. Social media is messing with our brains. Like yesterday, my buddy told me something that I liked, and I just tapped her twice on the forehead. It's a problem. Now, the senator's bill has suggested a few things, like limits for apps, you know, like how much time you can spend on them, which is fine, but I've got a few suggestions that I think would be way more effective. Like I was thinking, how about for every half hour you spend scrolling online, your phone automatically tweets out a picture of what you look like while you're spending all that time scrolling. That's what that should be. Huh? Or, here's another thing. If you want to get people off Instagram, we make a new feature where we say there's every 7th picture on your feed has to be a semi-nude photo of both of your parents. Yeah. Ah, yeah, you see, you're logging off already. Yeah. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, I don't have any semi-nude photos of my parents. Well, I do. I'll send them to you. And finally, in other news, here's one pretty big story that got buried because of the presidential Democratic debates. And it's a story about an American president who is racist. And no, it's not the one you're thinking of.
Some surprising audio recordings have surfaced of a phone conversation nearly a half-century ago between President Richard Nixon and future President Ronald Reagan.
President Richard Nixon recorded himself talking to then California Governor Ronald Reagan in October 1971, the day after the United Nations voted to recognize the People's Republic of China. Reagan had phoned Nixon at the White House to vent his frustration at African delegates who celebrated the vote.
Last night, I tell you, to watch that thing on television, I did. Yeah. To see those monkeys from those African countries, and they're still uncomfortable wearing shoes.
The Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation said if he said that 50 years ago, he shouldn't have, and he would be the first person to apologize.
You'll be the first person to... You should be the only person to apologize. What does that mean? It would be weird if he was like, well, I'll apologize, but only if those monkeys apologize first. What a strange thing to say. Also, they're like, if he said... There's a recording. He said the thing. So now that that recording has come out, Ronald Reagan will have to be canceled, which is going to be hard because life canceled him first, you know? Oh, it takes a lot of work to cancel a dead person. You got to hold a seance, summon their spirit back from the dead. Be like, Ronald Reagan, we have called you back to tell you, bye, Felicia. So now, because of these newly released tapes, Ronald Reagan officially has a racist asterisk next to his name, as do many former presidents. Woodrow Wilson was a segregationist. Andrew Jackson wiped out Native Americans. Thomas Jefferson had sex with his slaves. And George H.W. Bush shot Tupac. Yeah, I said it. Prove me wrong. So on the one hand, it is disturbing that America has a history of racist presidents. But look on the bright side, it also means that Donald Trump is more presidential than we thought.